Good morning, Rickster. I thought I had gone live a minute ago, but there's a second button you gotta push. I was just getting my coffee anyway. It was getting brewed. Just give me a second. Let me fix it's a little cloudy, isn't it? One second. Good morning, Brian. Good morning, Robert. We've got a great show today. Pardon me for being, oops, I was a minute late. I'm really sorry about that. We were a little delayed with all kinds of children business, house business. You know how it goes. You know how it goes, Kurt. You know how it goes, Joe. Welcome, team. Welcome, Joe. Yeah, we had put. There's two buttons I have to push to go live. I go into studio, and there's a separate go live. So I thought I had done it just before I went to get the coffee. So I thought you'd all be here when I got back from coffee, but it didn't work that way. But that's okay. That's okay. We'll wait for everyone to get in here. Um, Well, it's a little cloudy and rainy here today, which is a rarity, but it's nice. We've had some forest fires lately, or sugarcane fires here, and the air hasn't been so great because of that. We've got this ash that's been coming in, and so all these things have been burning, and the air's been a little not the greatest. I went for a little bit of a jog yesterday, so it wasn't that bad, but hasn't been fresh, let's say, can't take deep breaths. So this rain is welcome. Hopefully, we get rid of some of the troubles. But nevertheless, you can tell from the sun coming in from the windows that the sun is up, guys. It's up here. It's probably up where you are, unless you're on the other side of the world. And if you're on the other side of the world, you got to trust us. The sun is up. But it doesn't matter what side of the world you're on. You can tell if Bitcoin's running or not. And guess what, guys? It's running. We're good. All we have to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Yo, CK, back in the house. P-Man Van, hope you're doing well. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Bud. Happy springtime. Indeed, we celebrated the first day of spring on the show yesterday, but I'm going to tell you, I missed a few of the coincidences. So there's a few more I'm going to bring up. So we mentioned yesterday that it was the first day of spring. It's also a new moon. And it was the 20th anniversary of the war in Iraq. I didn't even realize that started on this day, and so it's kind of a bookend to some type of narrative that's around us right now, of course. So that's out. The other one that I want to mention is I don't know if you guys knew this, but this was, and it's the New Year in Iran. We're going to talk about Iran in just a second. It's the New Year in Iran. It's the New Year in many places in the world that do celebrate the old springtime beginning. And if you didn't know, it's actually baked into our Western calendar. I don't know if you guys have ever picked up on that. Of course, the month of September was the seventh month in the old way of counting, the Latin way of counting. Sept obviously means seven. October was the eighth month, right? November was the ninth month. December was the 10th month. And this was New Year's. This was New Year's. So it went 11th was January, 12th was February, with different names, named after gods, of course. And so it would be New Year for many people today, just like it is the first day of spring. It was yesterday and today, with all the orbital stuff. You never really can tell. But this year it is yesterday. But anyway, a lot of stuff happening right now, which we picked up on yesterday, which we'll continue to pick up on today, because today we're going to be talking all about the peace plan and how we're going to get out of all this mess and how close we really are to getting out of all this mess, right? We're really close. We're really close. So stick around today and you're going to see how close we are to living on a Bitcoin standard, to fixing the world's problems. It's a short little window we have to do it, but I think we have all the information we need to talk about how the future is just around the corner today. But first, of course, we like to start every show with the fakest news we can find. This one's pretty crazy. This is from the Daily Mail. So it turns out that an Iranian man who raped a lodger in London can't be deported because he might be persecuted in his homeland for being a convicted rapist. That's a pretty good one. That's pretty good. Not bad. The Economist did its best today. We're going to be talking about this a little more. The Economist came out, and here's their headline today. It's about our favorite country in the world right now, El Salvador, and their leader, Nayib Bukele, who maybe, we're hoping, maybe a keynote speaker at a little show I'm working on that'll be happening May 18th to 20th. It's not for sure. He's a busy guy. He might be the leader of the free world other than Satoshi. So people get busy, but we're in close contact and talking with him a lot. So hopefully it works out. Here's what The Economist says about Bukele and El Salvador. This is fresh from The Economist. According to the government's figures from last year, El Salvador's murder rate is on par with the United States, but El Salvadorians are sacrificing democracy for relative peace. The headline is El Salvador's authoritarian president is becoming a regional role model. Regional. And they say that because he's becoming, so there's multiple headlines. That was the tweet. Here's the full headline. The subheadline is, that is dangerous for democracy and human rights. But the funny thing is, if you read the article, what they basically come to the conclusion on is that using criminals and gangs to intimidate and disorient the population is like a key element to liberal democracies. Like if you don't have the trauma and the shock of gangs on your street, and then the funnel of trying to get the nice guys from the think tanks and the NGOs to get on the case, if you're not supporting that cycle of reformers, police, but the people are still, the criminals are still out there. If you're not playing cops and robbers, right? Or if you're not playing cops, NGOs, and drug dealers and murderers, you're not playing the game. It's not democracy anymore, right? That the whole thing requires you have criminals on the street, and then you got to stop them, right? You got to use your policies, you got to vote, and then when you vote, you're going to get a person who's going to go after the criminals, maybe, and then if that happens and it's not that good, you can get another one and someone else's turn. But as long as the game of cops and robbers is still going on, you got liberal democracy. So The Economist, thank you, right? Thank you. And what I find funny too is the rebuke here against Bukele is that El Salvador's murder rate is on par with the United States. It's the same. So somehow, because the murder rate is the same as the United States, the whole thing's kind of like suspicious and phony. It's not as low as they said it was, right? It's not quite as bad and low as they said. What's going on here with these kids? So that's what's going on in The Economist. One of the big stories we're tracking right now is we've got everyone kind of smashing the tech bros, people online talking about the bank run, people online in general talking, and the pace at which people are able to discuss things on Twitter has been revealed as a major catalyst for global events. So one of them being that you can have a bank run now, right? A lot of people criticizing Balaji for what he's doing, and they're saying, oh, his accelerationist tech bros are the ones hoping for global collapse and destabilization. You get a lot of people now even saying, well, right, if it wasn't for these people, we wouldn't be there. You had Credit Suisse this morning saying it's because of Twitter did it, right? It didn't matter that they've had financial troubles for years now. It was Twitter's fault, right? Because people can talk about things really quickly, therefore we should be suspicious. And that also applies to some of this war stuff, right? So we saw yesterday a whole bunch of propaganda around Xi and Putin meeting. We saw special attention paid to Putin walking Xi to his car at the end of the night because they had such a good bromance, people calling it a bromance. They're meeting again today to talk more about peace and strategic partnerships and how the relationship is based on their friendship and that extends to the country's friendship. But they were talking about a peace plan, right? They were talking about some form of peace plan. And what did we get from the American side? Well, you just look at the mainstream media, right? You get John Kirby, White House national security spokesperson, who says the call for a ceasefire in Ukraine is unacceptable. You get Blinken, who also said the world should not be fooled by any tactical move by Russia, supported by China or any other countries, to freeze a war on its own terms. You had Glenn Greenwald and Tucker Carlson. Glenn Greenwald came onto Tucker Carlson's show last night. So Glenn did his own show on very similar talking points and then goes on to Tucker's show and talks about them again. And the Columbia Bugle here says Tucker Carlson and Glenn Greenwald react to the Biden administration once again shutting down a potential ceasefire in the war in Ukraine. Glenn, from the very beginning, it's been clear that the United States wants this war to continue and wants it to go on for as long as possible because they have no interest in protecting Ukraine. They instead want to sacrifice Ukraine, have Ukraine destroyed in order to advance what they think is the United States' political interest, geopolitical interest, and the weakening of Russia. And so lots of people talking about this today. There was a really interesting article from John Mearsheimer. Quote from John Mearsheimer, which was published on Twitter. Oh, no, too many people on Twitter talking about this stuff. Be careful. University of Chicago professor John Mearsheimer. And here's what he said. I think that the rivalry, and I think this is it fits my worldview, so I'm sharing it with you. I think it fits my own. So it's a narrative bias for sure. Let me just warn you right now, you're getting narrative bias. So here's what he says. In the rivalry between us, the Americans, and the Russians will win. Now, you're probably going to say, why does he say that? Think about it. Who has more determination? Who really cares more about this situation, the Russians or the Americans? The Americans don't care that much about Ukraine. The Americans have made it clear they're not even willing to fight and die for Ukraine. So for us, they don't care that much. For the Russians, they've also made it clear it's an existential threat. So the balance of resolve, I think, is in their favor. And as we move down the escalation ladder, I think, and as this is just my assumption, that the Russians will win, not the Americans. I don't think it matters much to the US if we lose in the sense that the Russians prevail in Ukraine. I think the real losers in this war are the Ukrainians. And I think what has happened here is that we have guided the Ukrainians down the path of primrose. We pushed very hard to encourage the Ukrainians to become part of NATO. We pushed very hard to make them part of NATO. We pushed very hard to make them a Western bastion on Russia's borders, even though the Russians made it clear that it was unacceptable to them. And as a result, I'm here, and here I am talking about the West, took a stick and poked the bear in the eye. As you all know, if you take a stick and poke a bear in the eye, the bear probably won't smile and laugh at what you're doing. The bear will fight back. And that's exactly what happens. And this bear is going to tear Ukraine apart. This bear is in the process of tearing Ukraine apart. And again, we're back to where we started. Who is responsible for this? Are the Russians responsible for this? I don't think so. There is no doubt that the Russians are doing the dirty work, right? We can all admit that, right? We're not at all fans of the Russian army and every atrocity that's possible from any standing army, but this one in particular. But the question is, what made the Russians do it? And I think the answer is very simple: the United States, right? So again, we have, even just looking at the political situation, right? Just like the bank situation, we have these two conversations going on simultaneously. We've got a bunch of people who are using talking points, right? We will not freeze the war on Putin's terms. Don't listen to Putin. You can see the talking point dissemination. We talk a lot on the show about how information is laundered, how you use different political apparatus to get talking points that can then be cited and proliferate in a mainstream media sense. And we are constantly contrasting the much faster dialogue you have on social media, the much faster dialogue you're able to generate, and the more authentic dialogue you're able to generate using social media and even new platforms like Nostr, of course. If you go onto Nostr, you'll see even more granular conversations. You'll see even more tempered conversations, nuanced conversations, interesting conversations, frankly. You don't even, even on Twitter, of course, it continues to reward trolling behavior. And if you guys noticed, Elon Musk did release a plan for Twitter that should be materializing in the next few days or weeks. And from now on, your first responses you'll see in your timeline are from people you follow, which how is that not already the case, right? So that's an innovation. So it'll be the first folks you see are the ones you follow. And then the next will be verified, and then finally it'll be the unverified folks you don't follow, which should help us not reward trolling behavior. And if you think again how Community Notes works, right? Community Notes doesn't reward the most popular response; it rewards the response that has the most aggregate popularity. So if it's able to break through the solitary division of right and left and green or red and blue, then it gets to be promoted in algorithmically as a Community Notes interjection, right? And again, that's a very different way of using Twitter and should help have more sophisticated conversations like you're finding on Nostr. Now, Nostr, of course, is taking a select group of people who self-identify as Bitcoiners, and of course, we're going to have more interesting conversations because we don't have to explain little things to each other every single moment we want to have a conversation, right? Which is great, right? It's great for Bitcoiners and is continuing to be a vital resource. So, but let's go back again to this idea that social media and the speed at which people can communicate being such a destabilizing force. And here's something that Matthew Zeitlin, who's a reporter with Grid News in New York, of course, had to say about Balaji and everything that's going on. He says, one big difference between now and 2008 is that there's a highly networked set of influencers who see themselves as profiting from perceptions. And then he puts in parentheses, which I'm going to talk about, or even reality of systemic collapse. And so are very eager to convince others that the system is collapsing, right? So here he says profiting from the perception, right? But perception is reality for a lot of people, right? In politics, that's a euphemism that is used everywhere in politics and that most people believe in, right? That perception is reality. If it's perceived that way, and we're going to talk about perception and reality in a second when it comes to Alaska and energy and President Biden using his veto. So keep that in mind as we go forward. But here he says even reality. So I guess a highly networked set of influencers can't discuss or profit from the reality of systemic collapse. Well, if you profit from systemic collapse by promoting a new system which would bring more peace to the world, what's wrong with that? Right? Well, some of these people just can't get their minds around it. So he's even admitting the reality of systemic collapse, that it's within the realm of possibility, that it's in the spectrum of what's actually happening here. But he would rather that it still goes through the filtered process of he's in New York, he's with media, apparently he's an expert, you should give him influence, you should see the guy too, he's got the glasses, the whole bit, right? He's exactly as you would imagine him to be. So there you go. So now Doomberg did talk about this veto that President Biden just signed. So President Biden signed a veto Doomberg talked about two things: the veto that President Biden signed on ESG, as well as a go-ahead he gave to the Alaska energy project Willow. So here's what Doomberg said, right? The transformation is notable. So what he's talking about is, first he's talking about how Santa Claus was created and why Santa Claus is there. And this is in his Substack that he published this morning. So why Santa Claus is there. And it's an important lesson for children to understand after a while that deception is part of, I guess, child rearing. So he compares that, though, so what he says is the early realization that authority figures aren't always to be trusted is a tough but necessary lesson for developing minds. So what he says here is, while children can be excused for believing in physics-defying fantasies, there are legions of grown adults who bathe in similar delusions when it comes to energy policy. Specifically, there is a widespread belief among many otherwise rational people that humanity no longer needs fossil fuels, that we can stop relying on them soon without meaningful consequences to our way of life, and that our refusal to do so is a mere political choice. Given the intensity with which dogmas are held, it is understandable that politicians have played along, assuring these intellectual adolescents that Rudolph's nose is indeed shiny and red. Some might even say it glows. Despite the passage of time and elections, to us, Joe Biden will always be the senator from Delaware who could be counted on to aggressively defend the corporate interests of DuPont, one of the world's greatest environmental polluters. He is an old school politician who understands the stakes inherent in the price of gasoline at the pump. We have long viewed the game of footsie he plays with radical environmentalists through a rather cynical lens, understanding that politics often requires tolerating the views of extremists within one's camp long enough to survive the next election. Eventually, though, a child must be told that Santa isn't ever coming down the chimney and that Dad has been eating the cookies left out all these years. That day has come. On Monday, March 13th, President Biden approved the ConocoPhillips Willow drilling project in Alaska's National Petroleum Reserve. For many in the professional environmental class, this approval marks the shattering admission that Biden doesn't believe in green energy Santa, and they can't wrap their heads around it. Surely Biden knows that we are a few years away from kicking our oil habit, right? For a representative example of this bewilderment in print, we turn to The Atlantic's unironically titled article, "The Alaska Oil Project Will Be Obsolete Before It's Finished." So here's a quote from it, right? But the oil from the 3 drill sites approved today won't begin to flow for 6 years. It won't address any of our next week, next month, or next year supply concerns. In fact, Willow probably won't do much of anything. By the time it's finished, the gap may already be largely bridged. The world might not have enough renewable energy to power everything by 2029, but we'll have more than enough to keep the lights on without additional drilling, right? So that's what he goes out and says. But remember, the system requires him within politics. We've talked a lot about how politics infusing the energy system, politics now infusing the banking system, doesn't actually allow you to come to reasonable conclusions anymore. It's all about offsetting measures. We see it in the banking crisis, right? Print money, then it creates this other problem of inflation, and then you need to raise rates. But then the rates rising causes a maturity mismatch and everything they bought with the low interest rates just a little while ago. So the whip snap and whiplash of this quick movement simply means that they've got to print money again. So you're left trying to balance an ever out of balance seesaw that just doesn't seem to want to find equilibrium anymore. There isn't any thrust for equilibrium. So you get a guy like Biden doing much the same as what's going on in the banking sector, throwing band-aids at something. So he approved the Willow project, but then turns around immediately and vetoes a bill that both Republicans and Democrats signed, which was to ban ESG used in investment calculations, particularly for pensions, that pensions wouldn't be subjected to the risky allocations of speculators around energy and forcing them to put it into ESG qualified vehicles, which we know now are mostly a fraud, right? Silicon Valley Bank, super high, excellent, ESG rating. FTX and SBF, right? Sam Bankman-Fried, mega ESG guy, right? He could have gotten money out of this. But here's what Biden actually said, right? He goes, "I just vetoed my first bill. This bill would risk your retirement savings by making it illegal to consider risk factors MAGA House Republicans don't like," right? So here, they've got to say that the reason why they're supporting the ESG stuff is because it would give too much power to MAGA people, right? And the fact that they're having to put ESG requirements as, they can't say ESG requirements are good for investing because that's a little iffy at this point, right? That's not really the factor. Here, it's about recasting it as MAGA limitations, right? The problem with investment system is that MAGA would limit it, right? But everyone here is admitting the truth. Politics have infused the system. And again, we've talked a lot about how you can't build trains in America, you can't build washrooms in New York City, you can't build trains in Atlanta, right? Public transit doesn't get built. And it's because politics have entered this system, right? So lots of people talking about how the savings that would go into these projects now is just being left into the speculators and those who would actually like to be able to charge you for their expertise, which we haven't seen any proof really exists, right? So it's a part of the same dance where you get Wall Street again dancing with politics, dancing with regulators, um, um, dancing with broadcast media, who prefers the storylines to be divided into red and blue camps because it's an easy way to sell stories because you're feeding it to your audience, right? So that's a major part of what's going on here. But remember, that one of the funniest stories we've seen in a long time, right? So the same people that they would give, the same people they would give discretion to understand and navigate ESG investments are folks like Jamie Dimon, who, I don't know if you noticed, but yesterday he was the one, and JP Morgan was the one that bought 54 tons of nickel and stored it in a Dutch warehouse, but it turned out to just be rocks, right? And Mustafa has one of the funniest examples of how stupid this is. And he says, Jamie Dimon questioned Bitcoin's 21 million cap. He didn't verify. And that was just the other day in Davos in January, right? 21 million. He said it again, right? Jamie Dimon questioned Bitcoin's 21 million cap, didn't verify. He didn't question the 54 tons of nickel, didn't verify. Wrecked, right? Wrecked. So true, wrecked, right? Now, if you think about the narrative consistency, right, that's why you see all these people running out for the let's call it no appetite for peace that we see in Ukraine, at least on the American administration side. And you see the narrative consistency, the narrative wall that gets sent out with talking points and all of that kind of stuff. And you compare that to what's going on in energy, it's a very similar approach, right? But Balaji had, and people criticizing the ability of information to spread virally in social media as the antithesis of this narrative formation that goes on with these broadcast systems. So Balaji says here, this may be one for the books. The advent of AGI, the devaluation of the dollar, the rise of Bitcoin, the global flippening to the east. Even for someone who is thinking about these trends, the pace of change will feel shockingly, disorientingly fast. It reminds me a bit of the early 1900s. In 1910, you still had 9 royals meeting. The old world of princes was still around and seemingly immortal. But under the surface, technology had changed everything, and the 20th century roared into existence a few days later. And on this day, right, we've been making all of these allusions to the new year, the new moon, the first day of spring, winter being over, right? Here's what is actually going on when we talk about a whole new world bubbling under the surface, right? So remember, we've got fights about banks, we've got fights about the economy, all political now. We've said for a long time that having this stuff purely political, purely partisan politics, war and peace now is pure partisan politics. It wasn't always that way. Even back in the day of the Iraq War, 20th anniversary going on right now, you still had a bipartisan approach. You were still able to suck out some of the politics, probably because of corruption, right? Probably because the stakes weren't as high, people weren't as saturated in this stuff as they've become, right? We didn't really think about US elections back in 2000. I remember that election very well. It was a popularity contest between Al Gore and George Bush II. They agreed on every policy approach. There was no window between them. I can still remember the Saturday Night Live episodes from that era, and they would have Will Ferrell playing George Bush, and I forget who was playing Al Gore at the time. But anyway, the whole point of the skit, that which they did regularly, was, well, I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. They just never disagreed on anything. They were incapable of disagreement. So, and you saw a lot of that, right? Everyone bringing up these quotes now from Biden supporting the Iraq War back in 2003. Lots of people bringing up people on all sides supporting the narrative that there were weapons of mass destruction, that it was in America's best interest. I saw an article of Thomas Friedman going viral yesterday. Of Thomas Friedman, New York Times writer, he was on Charlie Rose saying, "Well, we had to go and show them that you couldn't you couldn't talk about America that way. We had to go and show them we were the toughest." And they had to, he literally says on the show, they needed to suck it, right? He goes, they had to suck it. That was his whole explanation for what was going on in the war at that time. And this is a confirmed Trump derangement syndrome Democrat, everything you want to call it, right? That's who he is. He's always been that way. He's never not been that. And at the time, he supported it. And I don't think has ever changed his mind. I think he's still employed. Glenn Greenwald was the one who shared this video. And Glenn Greenwald continues to attack him for his appetite for war years after the case, years after the fact, right? Years after the fact. So, so the idea that politics is infused and saturated everything we do, energy, right? And talking out of both sides of their mouth, right? I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And you get the banks doing the same. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I'm going to make these people happy and those people happy. But that's what's falling apart. You can't actually do that. There's physical limitations on who you can say yes to and who you must say no to. There are physical limitations in how much narrative can actually get people to align when they actually disagree on things. And the good news is, and from here to the rest of the episode, as long as we go, I'm just going to be giving you the good news because I got a lot of good news today. I got the most good news, which will form the basis of a peace plan, which will form the basis of our capacity to get out of all of this trouble quickly. And here's the first story. Might be I'm not even sure this is the biggest story of the day. There's two stories that I'm going to cover right now that are bigger than everything going on in the world. We just don't know. Exactly as Balaji said, right? And Balaji's exact quote was, let me get it for you again. I just want to reiterate it because it really does speak to how much things are changing and how close we are. So again, he says, under the surface, technology had changed everything. And the 20th century roared into existence a few years later. Call him a tech bro, if you will. Call me a tech bro, if you will, right? Here's what's going on. So a US-based developer of small modular nuclear reactors signed a deal to sell 24 of its power plants to UK customers, putting pressure on rival makers. We talk about Rolls-Royce and their small modular nuclear reactor here very often. So this company is called Last Energy. Brent Kugelmass is the CEO of this company, signs a deal to sell 24 of these plants, right? Cost estimate is $5,000 for kilowatt capacity, but I'm going to tell you what that really turns into. They didn't need any government funds. They did this all privately. They're selling it directly to UK customers who are in need of this energy. And it turns out that each small modular nuclear reactor costs only, wait for it, £100 million. It's £100 million they've got the price down to for small modular nuclear reactors, 20 megawatt capacity, which is good for 40,000 homes, which is a small town, right? It's a pretty good size town. So they'll be deployed, they'll be running in 2026. They'll be running in 2026. Zero government dollars involved in finance. And that's a big deal. Now, here's where you can start seeing this thing going because Bitcoiners, again, are the natural market. Bitcoin mining is the natural market for no government involved in financing projects that related to energy. Bitcoiners and Bitcoin miners have a massive appetite to get rid of regulatory risk, new energy grid risk, corporate risk from the politics entering energy. We've seen regulatory risk wreak havoc on the New York state mining operations. We've seen regulatory risk threatened in other parts of America. So, and usually the choke point is with the energy companies themselves. They simply say to the energy utility, you can't give them that much more energy. You're not going to be able to do it. It won't work, right? So right away you start seeing this entirely new um, opening for Bitcoiners. I used to think that the threshold for the modular nuclear reactors would be in the low billions, like a billion or 2 billion, which meant we still needed more consolidation of finance power. We still needed more value for each Bitcoin in order to level up the whole industry to be able to afford one of these Rolls-Royce nuclear reactors. Well, this guy got them down to about 1/10 the cost of what the Rolls-Royce nuclear reactors were going to be going for. And he's already sold 24 of them to the UK, right? And again, no government financing needed. The short time frame where these things are going to be operational, just 3 years from now, means that we might have a whole new business on our hands that would even support what the Atlantic, I'm going to agree with the Atlantic in some ways. I think we'll always need combustion. There's a special force that comes with burning oil and gasoline and the power of combustion that you can't necessarily get with a supercapacitor and battery power and stored electricity, and even having that much electricity stored to do some of the things that we can do with jet fuel. And now I do believe we'll have electric airplanes and things like that, but there's still a reason why you'd want combustion. There's still a reason why you're going to need oil. And I don't think it's ever going away. It's just a magical power that is useful and portable and never has entropy to its system, unless you spill it, right? Unless you spill the actual jerry can, then that's a form of entropy, I guess. But it will be as useful to you now as it would be in 5 or 6 years. And as long as you can physically transport the material, you're going to have the energy you need, unlike electricity, whose batteries will degrade over time. So that it's now already becoming this cheap makes it realizable for Bitcoiners today. Today, you could hear about a Bitcoin miner buying one of these last energy reactors, and boom, we're off to the races once this thing catches on. If we can systematize Bitcoin miners moving over to owning energy sources, hydro, wind, well, wind sucks, but for some people, I'm going to put a little windmill in my farm just because I get constant wind, and why not? I don't need a huge one to make a big noise. I mean, I'm just doing an old fashioned homestead windmill. I don't want the noise around me. I don't want to kill any birds either, so it won't go that high. Just kind of like this, not that big. So energy, and remember, the whole point of what's going on globally is a fight over the reference rate for energy, right? The reference rate for energy has always been US dollars. The US petrodollar was the system Americans used to enforce globally synchronized financial markets so that you could use sanctions to punish countries that didn't adhere to the rules-based order that was dictated by the United States. And that is ending very quickly. That is ending very quickly. We've already seen all the negotiations and deals with Xi meeting with Putin. A big part of that is to guarantee not just the flow of technology and goods and support for the war and other things. It's to make sure that Russia's oil can find a market and a price which Shanghai and its stock exchange is happily providing to the world. Now, we continue to make the bet here on this show that no one is going to buy a shitcoin that comes from Russia and the CCP and other places that don't know how to manage money and that are completely batshit crazy and basket cases financially. So there's no way the shitcoin that they released to create a market for energy, even if it's the Chinese yuan. I don't see globally enough people having confidence in this system, because it is a confidence game, right? That's what's been so great about all this discussion around banks and all this discussion around the bank run, is that we understand more than ever the whole thing was a confidence game, and we're forcing the actual promoters of the system, Jerome Powell and Janet Yellen and Joe Biden, to actually come and help pump confidence in the system, but they're so uncharismatic that it shows that they're not good at promoting confidence in a system, and therefore everyone is focusing on the lack of confidence and the people who should be able to conjure it, which is a good place for Bitcoiners to be in, right? I've always said that the best marketing team that we could have starts with Joe Biden, and just there was a tweet yesterday from Max Kaiser or Stacy that went viral, which was a picture of Joe Biden looking particularly old and senile and broken down and robotic and crazy, and comparing that to Bukele, right? So the USD and Bitcoin. So I've always thought that. I've always thought the contrast, we've said it many times on the show, watching Biden and his dementia shuffle is a good thing, right? We understand more about the system in that one image, the mimetic value of watching the president stumble and be unable to figure out how to open a door. And did you know this little anecdote? I don't know if you know it. But when MacArthur took over as the shogun of Japan, which is an endearing name that even Japanese gave to him, the foreign shogun, when he went over and took over Japan and became the supreme commander during the transition period, he had to meet with Hirohito, the emperor. And this I don't know where I read this, but I've always just had this image in my head. So when he went to when he went to the when he went to meet Hirohito, the emperor of Japan, had never opened a door in his whole life, right? And he had to have a private meeting with MacArthur. So they let him in, they opened the door for him to get into the room, and then MacArthur told them what they were going to do. They were not going to kill him, right? They're going to, not only that, they were going to let him stay in charge for many reasons that are really important, and that MacArthur, I think, made the right choice. Hirohito was not a war criminal, as far as I can tell, and had been usurped in his role by military-industrial complex of Japan. And what happened was, when MacArthur dismissed him and said, "Well, we're not going to execute you. You're going to be in charge," and da, 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 he tried to leave, but he couldn't open the door. He never opened a door in his whole life. He didn't know what to do, right? And this kind of shocked MacArthur, who was like, "Is this really the guy I got to have confidence in?" Because and I don't know if you know about Japanese doors. It's like you slide it, right? It's not rocket science. So it was kind of a moment for him where he was like, "I don't know," right? But just the same as with us, right? When we saw Biden come out and give that speech, "I assure you the financial system is strong and you can have confidence in it." And then watching him shuffle out, not taking questions, running away from questions, and trying to open the door, it's a postcard for Bitcoin. I mean, it's a literal postcard for Bitcoin. So, big news coming from that, and the capacity of peace to be driven by a sane energy policy around the world, and no more. Because again, the main, if you follow the money and you really want to know what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, there's a whole way to see this as American energy interests seeing that the American military industrial complex will help them expand market share, for lack of a better word, to take the Russian market share away from them and give it to American energy companies, which I think is what happened, right? That doesn't matter what you think about the war and belligerence, and if you believe Mersheimer, or if you believe any one of Blinken and any one of these people, the net result of the conflict in Ukraine and Russia is that U.S. energy companies have a lot more market to sell to, including Europe. So it's a big change, right? It's a big change, and is part of what has us all excited about the capacity for Bitcoin to make a better energy system in the world. Now, here's the next excellent news, right? This is excellent news, and it is Brian Rommel. And what did Brian Rommel do? Well, we've been talking about the problem of centralization of AI for a while. It's a new, I think, existential threat to Bitcoin and many other things, because if the AI becomes programmed by corporate forces, we can only wonder at its ability to run psyops. If you thought the industrial censorship machine was bad, if you thought the capacity of normal broadcasters today using the information laundering system we talk about on this show all the time was hard to fight against and seemed seemingly here forever and unmovable, unshakable, all these things, well, AI, there was a whole worry that AI would support that and help crystallize it and further its exploitative structures and exploitative systems. Well, here's what Brian did, right? And this is in line with everything we've talked about on this show for AI. Here's what he did. Brian Rommel. I am very excited to announce I have been successful in installing and operating a full Chat GPT knowledge set and interface fully trained on my local computer, and it needs no internet once installed. There are no editors and there is no censorship. I am using Alpaca from Stanford and Dalai Lama. The training model costs about $530 to build locally, yet has the capabilities of Chat GPT 3.5. The software is free and open source, and I am working on a pre-configured package for anyone to have local training and access to an LLM GPT AI. This model is now in a live connect with all of my other AI systems, and the results have been absolutely stunning. I'll be writing more about this soon, but today, um, but today you will own your own AI and train it yourself. The yeah, and you will, but today you will own your own AI and it will only answer to you. And that's the important part. It will only answer to you. That's something I predicted a long time ago, and something that I continue to predict on this show, that the future of AI is each of us to have our own that we train and we have a better understanding and trust with, because it literally is a reflection of our own thoughts, of our own ideas, and of our own predictions and of our own worldview, and will help strengthen those and will help protect us from fake news. It will help not drive more fake news into our brains, but literally protect us from fake news. This is a big change, right? And he goes on. So he says analysts and technologists estimate that the critical process of training an LLM, such as GPT-3, would cost over $4 million. And he says, today I built it with Alpaca training for less than $600 on the same data. And he says, it is vital to know prompt formation for this current model is in this mode, between quotes, instruction response. So he's talking about how you prompt it, right? Quite important to understand. Super prompts are more powerful than simple one-shot question and answers with GPT. So he's getting into some of the more technical parts, but I still think useful. But what Brian just did is what I said would happen to AI eventually. The business model that he is rushing towards here, of giving a person their own primordial AI that is without training yet, and that we train it ourselves so that it knows what to talk about in the morning. My vision of it is that you wake up and it, in the same way that your algorithms on Google sort of know what you're interested in, right? Well, you wake up and it has a conversation. Did you read this article? It would help me prepare for the show, for example, right? I would say, well, what are the interesting articles that you think I should know about this morning that would be interesting to my audience based on everything else we've talked about over the last whatever years, right? And indeed, it would just show me what happened last night. It would have read those already, synthesized them. I know one of my good friends just had all of Arthur Hayes' recent article on Bitcoin to $1 million. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but Arthur Hayes just wrote a piece the other day about his predictions on Bitcoin and what's going to happen in light of the bank crisis. And he had it broken down into a couple paragraphs because it's long. Arthur writes pretty long pieces, so it's really long. He had it break down into that length. And then he even imagined, he told ChatGPT, now imagine Jerome Powell answering this, right? Use Jerome Powell's rhetoric, use Jerome Powell's history of public comment, and have him comment on Arthur Hayes' piece. So for the playground that is AI right now, it's perfect, right? It didn't set off any woke filters, any woke ideas. It didn't provoke the corporate. It didn't uncover the clear corporate training that goes into much of the AI, because a lot of what you see online right now is people trying to expose the corporate training, which I think is an important exercise. I'm not criticizing people who use AI in that way, making it trip on itself, making it say stupid, contradictory things. You see the basic formula: write a poem about Joe Biden, and it writes a poem. Write a poem about Kamala Harris, and it writes the poem. Write a poem about Trump. Can't do it. He's divisive. Can't do it. So people exposing that is a good thing, and has definitely alerted us all to a major problem with AI. But you get people trying to solve it, which is what we thought would happen and what we continue to predict is going to be the case. So you get people that are out there trying to think about the future of AI, trying to decentralize it, right? Because indeed, the thrust of Bitcoin is to decentralize things, and the world we're building is decentralized from an energy grid point of view, right? Energy security, energy literacy, being things that Bitcoiners just understand better than most people in the world. We've been thinking about energy literacy for a long time. All the attacks on Bitcoin from the energy point of view, this idea that you can choke Bitcoin from energy, has at once made us understand that we need to own energy more. And indeed, if we're going to be the reference rate for energy in the world, we also should help promote energy systems that align with Bitcoin. And one of those things is to decentralize the electrical grid. And now that we're in all of this collapse and everyone is sort of moralizing that Bitcoiners are accelerationists and that we're cheering on the end of the world, we're cheering on the end of the bank system, everything that I mentioned earlier about that guy from, what was his journalist's name again? That was telling Balaji, Matthew Zeitlin. I'll remind you what he said. One big difference between now and 2008 is that there's a highly networked set of influencers who see themselves as profiting from perceptions or even reality. I love he puts in the even reality. I think it's hilarious, right? Even reality. So if the systemic collapse is reality, I guess you shouldn't mention it on Twitter, is what he's saying here, right? Especially if you're going to profit from it, right? You shouldn't profit from systemic collapse. It doesn't matter if you're making something better, I guess, right? You just shouldn't talk about it and shouldn't profit from it. So people criticizing Bitcoiners recently because of this, right? That we're cheering on a systemic collapse and everyone's saying, well, I hope you guys have bullets too, because that's the world you're promoting. Well, Marty Bent came up with, I think, the simplest, cleanest group of prescriptions for what Bitcoiners can do in this time now. And it lends to everything I'm talking about, building a new world and aligning ourselves in a way that isn't doomer, that isn't an accelerationist, let the world burn situation, that is positive and that has implications, I think, for exactly what Balaji is talking about, the world and surface technology being the surface and the stuff of technology, the technological innovations that are happening below the surface that can help change the world before you know it. And here's the entire list. He managed to do it in a small bullet point list, and all the ingredients are there. And if this list is realized in the real world, which I think we're already down the road of doing, we're going to actually create not a hyperinflated economic collapse. We're going to supplant collapse and hyperinflation with hyper Bitcoinization, which is much more fun, which is a good time. And here's what it looks like. It's energy abundance, right? So he says, first of all, the hash rate needs to be more granularly distributed, that we should work on that as Bitcoiners. Well, what we know from this new small modular nuclear reactor project being $100 million a reactor, we can start getting there. You can see more participants enter that space. You can see more home citadel situations where Bitcoiners are together. They use the energy for their home. They also have the nuclear reactors, 40,000 homes that can be powered with this, or a big Bitcoin mine and a couple of homes, right? So it's one or the other. He goes on further, mining pools need to be further distributed to eliminate choke points. Indeed, that would happen with a decentralization of the grid. So both of his points here are about decentralizing the grid and having smaller capacity in more locations around America, which I think is the way things are headed. The way things are headed, right? Oh, yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. The Lightning Network needs to continue maturing and being battle tested. Indeed, if you're going to get more people to use it as a commercial tool, if you're going to get more people to use it in applications like Nostr or new networks like Nostr, right? Because there are some applications like Damus, but it is a network and different clients, different servers, different configuration than anything out there at commercial scale right now. And you need something like Lightning that can plug this in and have the throughput that's required, right? He says wallets need to be better, more intuitive UX. I think you're going to hear a lot about that at Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, May 18th to 20th, because everyone has known that wallets do need a upgrade in UX and UI, but we're getting there, right? Multi-sig solutions need to be more widespread and embedded in business practices. Indeed, you're seeing all kinds of people understand that, because one of the things that the depositor relationship in banks has underlined is that there's still a whole bunch of people who can't and don't want to go through self custody. They're too afraid of it. But the answers are there. Self custody plus multi sig allows for that peace of mind. It allows for you to take some of the burden away. And again, I think AI is going to be one of the biggest implications for this. I think AI is going to help you manage your Bitcoin better than any multi-sig system, better than any bank could, right? And so that's happening. Transacting privately needs to be made more accessible, right? We have all the reasons for that in the environment that we have now. Operation Choke Point, political censorship. We've been living with that for over 10 years now. We've been living with political censorship in America at scale for over 10 years now. And people are getting trained more and more to why they want private transactions. So I think that's happening. Hardware devices need to get ready for mass production. Right? I think that's already in queue, in the sense that now that we've had this bank run, now that people are starting to understand that deposits are not safe, and even if they are safe, they're only safe because of money printing, which will dilute the value of what you have deposited anyway. So right away, that's a major part of this, right? Point of sale systems need to be mainstreamed. But finally, what he says here, Bitcoiners need to be prepared to onboard family members and friends looking to move into Bitcoin. Indeed, if you follow what Marty is saying here, you have the entire battle plan of how we're going to have a moral high ground, right? Which is very hard to deal with when you're debating in politics, right? No matter what, if you're on a moral high ground, I'm here to help people. I'm here to help my family. I'm here to help my neighbor. And all Bitcoiners are trained in this. I mean, who doesn't have that identity amongst their group of peers, if you're a Bitcoiner, that, oh, go talk to them about Bitcoin, right? Because everybody knows that once you go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you have an intense appetite to talk about this stuff and learn about this stuff and share it. So that is already cultivated in us as a matter of practice, and it seems to emanate naturally from anyone who is interested in Bitcoin. So it's a big change. So there you go. My extended family think I'm nuts, Joe says. Yeah, they won't. They won't. They won't much longer. So, in conclusion, right? In conclusion, we've got all kinds of things that are clearly breaking. Right? We get this inability for Putin and Xi to broadcast peace around the world because it gets thrown into the political hopper. We get the inability for energy systems to proliferate on the world because they get thrown into the political hopper. The banking system thrown into the political hopper. But under the surface, Bitcoiners are building systems that are transcending political division, that are allowing us to align energy, that are allowing us to align freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and are allowing us now, I think, to understand the value of decentralized systems at a systemic level, right? Decentralizing systems systemically is one of the things that Bitcoiners are going to push. And we're going to do it by just being friendly with our neighbors, telling them what's going on, what we think is going on, telling them what we are afraid of and not afraid of, and sharing that information. And if you listen to Marty's list here, that's literally all we need to do, while these other systems almost self heal, right? Energy systems. And then once those things happen, I think we're going to have a peace plan between American people and Chinese people and Russian people that is about energy abundance and about having your own financial capacity unmitigated by the state, which is truly the separation of money and state, right? If we can have that, if we can run the energy ourselves, we're going to have the negotiating power to separate money and state, because we're going to be able to protect money from advances on the state, and we'll be there. We're going to be there. All right, let's read some of these comments, and then indeed, I've got to go. Christian saying here that Nolan and I are going to be on Cafe Bitcoin at 10:30 this morning. Indeed. Come around, everyone. We're going to be talking Bitcoin 2023 and all this other crazy stuff going on in the world. There's a lot going on, right? Let's go back and see some of these comments quick. A lot of comments today, team. Amazing. Okay. Hello, springtime, Joseph Norwood says. All right. They reported no murders in El Salvador for 300 days. So the fake news framing from The Economist said last year that the numbers from last year had the same murder rate as America. If you do 300 years, you're getting more of this year and less of last year. But I think they arrested all those gang folks last year. So, but what I love though is that they say it with a straight face. They're no better than America. How can they go around talking about how they're this peaceful place when they have murder? I love how the comparison to America is used here to say, well, you're not so good, right? Which makes his warnings about traveling to America, the trolley warnings that El Salvador said, don't go to Chicago, even funnier, right? Friends, good vibes, indeed. Fact check, Bitcoin wins. Yeah. Um, as long as they are just LED Christmas lights, yeah. My OCD appreciates the aligned logo with the background. Oh, yeah, that's not bad, huh? I didn't even see that until now. Pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. I like it. Just noticed the alignment. Nice. Welcome, Dex. Welcome, Dex. OCD doesn't get enough appreciation. No, I'm the same way. I have a lot of those things. At least they are level headed since shit pours. Yeah. 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 So in the future, one Bitcoin, maybe, yeah, yeah. It's 100 million now. It's not. We're beyond Balaji's point of view, but yeah, let's go, guys. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Yeah, it is really a big deal. That and the AI to me are two just perfect examples of what Balaji is talking about here. Stuff getting built that no one's paying attention to. And pretty soon, you're just in the same way that we don't pay attention to those princes who used to meet in the lead up to World War One. We're not going to pay attention to the Joe Bidens, and it just won't be as big, right? We're going to shut down the federal government. You'll still have politicians. That's not the federal government, by the way. You understand that this stuff is the government is like the bureaucracy. The elected people are representatives, and it's not quite the same. BTC requires no confidence, sort of like gravity. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. I'm going to steal that, Robert. Robert, I like that. I really like that. Joe Biden is like an emperor because he doesn't know how to use stairs. Personal AI sounds great to me. It's coming, Joe. It's coming. It's coming. I mean, it is a coming. So people will finally have some form of our intelligence, albeit artificial. Yeah, Brian, I saw someone say this was an interesting just anecdote the other day that before global warming, you had fears of global cooling. There was another one too that made it all symmetrical. I don't remember what it was. Oh yeah. Before our demographic collapse worries, we were worried about overpopulation, Malthusian stuff. And now with AI, we're worried about super intelligence taking over. So the formula here is always the opposite is what comes to be the thing you worry about. We might be worried that it makes people even dumber because they just offload all computational burdens to AI. So yeah, it could be that we might be getting dumber. I don't think so, but could be. Well, the original idea for hypertext was that we'd own our own data. If we're not doing that by the time of AI, we're toast. Yes, we are, Jeremy. Yeah. You could. Well, yeah, I think that's the case. The only other way is if it gets banned, and it might, right? Because you're going to hear more calls to ban AI because it's gonna dispel, especially if it's personally trained and not corporately trained. Imagine its capacity to help with fake news. So you're going to get the fake news trying to save its own life, and we'll see AI as an existential threat because it's so easy to imagine. You wake up and you talk about what's going on in the world with AI, who filters the bullshit from the reality for you every day, the way the news is supposed to. And if that's not an existential threat to the news, beyond listening to what your friends say on Twitter about the news, because that still has one level of psyops that can enter the equation, this would be totally different. And indeed, so either we own it all, or it ends up getting banned or denuded into some thing that helps you pick a movie or something like that, right? Or make art or write some copy for selling shit, which it very well just could turn into, right? It could have no political opinions, no opinions on the economy. Flower turbines are a neat looking windmill with a wide range of applications. Yeah, I've seen a few of these models that I'm interested in for wind. I just get a lot of wind. That's why I would do it. It seems like Bitcoiners are being called on to thread the needle for humanity. That's a great way to put it, Brian. And indeed they are. I think it is more and more becoming obvious that it's our job. It's our job in World War III to help people understand, first of all, what the war is all about, and to get rid of some of the anxiety and to get rid of some of the troubling things that keep people up at night and keep them from being effective and keep them afraid, is more or less it. So yeah, I've said for a long time now, we're D-Day. We are the D-Day operation. So Bitcoiners are a small fringe, extremely small minority with the power to take down the giant banking machine. How weak is that system in the first place? Well, P-Man, it's an entropy situation, right? It has been so um, it's been so rotted for so long now that it is weak. And unfortunately, it just looks so big, and people can't get their minds around the reality here that, just like Doomberg was mentioning, right? The people who don't understand that never got the Santa Claus lesson, right? That your parents, people older than you, can lie, actively lie to you. Um, it takes a while to understand that. Check out Crypto Cloak's Bitcoin Space Heater kit. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Add your own S9. Yeah, I've seen that. Love it. Yeah, I'm going to be doing that next year. Wallet of Satoshi is slick and it works with Nostr. Yeah, I have been enjoying Wallet of Satoshi. I have been. Software lays out the case. Yeah, I've seen that. Software is talking about Jason Lowry's book. Has tons of Lightning. Ellen Bits has tons of. Yeah, it's getting there. It's getting there. AI could replace the expensive education. Yeah, I've seen. Who was talking about that yesterday? I saw someone doing that. Talking about AI for kids. I can see that. I'm going to do it. Right. I'm going to do it. I think McTimmy is also a homeschool dad here. Not tons, but a few. He's talking about, I guess, this one. Yeah, Ellen. I haven't started experimenting with homeschool AI yet, McTimmy, but if you do, my kids are still a little too young for it. But they're excited about the idea of a digital friend, which I've told them they will have in their lifetime. My extended family think I'm nuts. Get used to that, force feed the orange pill. Yeah, one thing I don't like about the orange pill analogy is that, like the force feed part of it, and I think it's not about force feed. I think it's just about getting people's anxiety down in the end, right? That's a part of it. Point of sale is paramount now, in my opinion. Bitcoin is boutique money if it can't be used widely and conspicuously. Yeah, but one of the things that we know more or value more than anyone else in World War III is the value of farming and farmers and betting on farmers. And so I think that Bitcoin selectively attaching itself to different marketplaces like farms and farmers is strategically way more important, because consumerism ain't going to make it here, guys. It's not going to be the same. We're not. It's just not, right. We're headed to a world where we only really consume what we want and need desperately, and it's not just the credit cards and short-term dopamine hits and all of that stuff. High time preference. It's not that. And because it's changing, strategically aligning with certain marketplaces is probably more important than making sure Walmart takes Bitcoin. Like, I don't give a fuck about Walmart. Um, I'm appreciative of Walmart. I'm not an anti-Walmart person. I think it's brought a lot of people, saving money and living better. Um, but I don't know if we need to go through all of that stuff. I think as long as we get all the ranchers, imagine Bitcoin catches on with all American cattle ranchers. That's a big win. That's a big win. If they only start pricing their stuff in Bitcoin, game over. It's like energy, right? Like, I think we just win. If psychologically their only market that exists for steak is Bitcoin or good steak, then it's going to be a very good thing. He'll be listening. He loves Cafe Bitcoin. Thanks, Joe. I'll be on. There you go. The less than effective club. That's been my experience of it. But I'm convinced if it does relate to reality, there's certainly a way to make it more appealing to people. Yeah. We need a Whitfield Diffie of AI. Yeah. All right. Kids are starting to run around here. I'm going to have to. All right. I got to go. Kids are needing some attention. Peace. I'll be on the show later on today, everyone. Thanks for coming. See you tomorrow. Same time.